Dear educators, today we will learn about story writing and the special techniques that make a story readable, interesting and engaging. Who doesn't love a good story? Whether it is in a form of a movie, a play, a novel or a storytelling session, there is always a fictional or non-fictional story to be told, read or written. This is due to the elements that make up a story. In fact, it is mostly due to the challenges that the characters face, struggle with and sometimes overcome or even succumb to that make the story so gripping. Story writing in particular is a fun, creative process that requires the use of special techniques that would ensure that the reader's interest is maintained throughout the story. During this session, we will learn about how to hone the story writing skills of our students, particularly with creating conflicts and resolutions. We will focus on creating interesting and innovative stories filled with literary techniques such as flashback and plot twists. What is a narrative? We know that narratives are oral or written accounts of events that are connected in time and space. Story Pyramid describes the 5 key stages for writing a story from start to finish. These stages are exposition, rising action, climax, falling action and resolution. Let's study one of the most popular fairy tale, Cinderella, with reference to these stages. The introduction of Cinderella is a crucial element in the story, introducing the characters and setting. The author introduces the exciting force which propels the story into action. The protagonist Cinderella lives with her wicked stepmother and stepsisters, who force her to live alone in their tower. Her loving father has died and she has only mice and birds as friends. The introduction also introduces the key event, the invitation to the ball, which propels the story into action. The rise of the plot thickens as Cinderella moves forward, potentially facing setbacks and complications. The climax, which determines the story's end, occurs when Cinderella goes downstairs to check if the glass slipper fits. After navigating complications, Cinderella proves she is the girl that the prince had been dreaming of. The fall of the story occurs when Cinderella goes downstairs to check if the solitary glass slipper fits. This is a short fall, as the protagonist's journey continues with the final devastation. However, the Cinderella's happy ending is referred to as her happily ever after ending. We also know that those experiences in a narrative may be factual or fictional. We are also familiar with the elements of a story: character, setting, conflict, plot, theme or message. What is a conflict? One of the elements that drives the story is the conflict. Let us examine why in a story we need conflict and how to create it. Conflict is a part of life. Thus, it is evident in aspects of our daily interactions and activities. The absence of conflict in a story, movie or novel makes it boring and unappealing to the reader. If there is no conflict, then there is no story. In literature, the term conflict is a struggle or disagreement or turmoil between two opposing forces, characters or things. Some types of conflict include person versus self, person versus nature or environment, person versus person, person versus supernatural, person versus machine or technology. Person versus self. To explain this type of conflict, let's take an example of the story where one of the main characters has an internal conflict or problem. The problem may be emotional, mental, psychological or physical. For example, the character may have a dilemma that is unable to decide on the best option or he or she may have a self-esteem or health-related issue. Coming to the second category, that is person versus nature or environment, I would say that this type of conflict is very popular in adventurous stories. The main character or protagonist is in direct conflict with nature or environment. Nature can take many forms, such as natural disasters, getting lost in a forest, falling into a ditch or a well, or any problem brought about by natural phenomena. Person versus person. This may perhaps be the most common form of conflict found in the stories and movies. The protagonist gets into conflict with the villain or antagonist. This conflict can take various forms such as physical fights, war, verbal exchanges, betrayal, and heartbreak. Person versus the supernatural. This type of conflict is normally between the character and a ghost, an evil spirit, a warlock or wizard, an ogre or supernatural force. Typically, this type of conflict was popular in fables and fairy tales. Can you think of any fairy tale where this type of conflict is evident? Many mystery novels also contain this type of conflict, and the protagonist faces a creature or super being. Person versus machine or technology. This type of conflict has become popular in 21st century as technology has infiltrated almost all the aspects of our lives. Increasingly, more machines and robots are being designed and brought to life. Thus, conflict with machines or technology is inevitable. The protagonist gets himself in direct conflict with the machine. Story plan. Think of a narrative that you would like to develop. You can use one of the prompts on the screen to create your own. Which conflict would be most effective for the story that you would like to tell? Decide on the most appropriate based on the categories discussed and use it as a starting point to develop your plan. You do not have to decide on a title now. Instead, focus on developing the ideas that you want in your story. Developing conflict in narratives. The intensity of the conflict created in a narrative piece can make or break the story. It can repel or appeal to the reader. It is crucial to fully develop the conflict in a story because it is the blood that keeps the heart of the story pumping. To help develop conflict when writing short stories, we can do a few things. Decide on the type of characters you want to portray in the story. Create characters who have opposing personalities. Once you have done this, you can then decide on what type of conflict would truly reflect these characters. For instance, your characters can be someone in power and someone who has little power. Next is ensure that characters are not only different in personalities, but also they have different values. This means that characters will have different desires and ways of handling situations. Ultimately, different and contradictory decisions taken will bring details about conflict. For example, one character may believe in me first, while the other believes in altruism. Allow characters to experience setbacks or hindrances. If characters are always contented and always get their way, there will be no conflict. Thus, as a writer, you need to create scenarios in your story that will cause displeasure, anger, hurt, betrayal, and regret. For instance, a character may find that she does not have the strength to go up against a challenge successfully. She also has to face a lack of support from friends who do not believe her to be capable. Include an antagonist who is extremely powerful and strong-willed. A powerful antagonist will keep the characters, especially the protagonist, on his or her toes and test his or her strength. The protagonist will therefore have to be creative to defeat the antagonist, and this will not only enhance the conflict, but also help in the development of the plot. For instance, the antagonist may not be only powerful, but also wealthy and well liked by most, although he is secretly evil. Resolving conflict in narratives. After you have developed the conflict in your story and it has reached its pinnacle or climax, you must find a resolution. The resolution begins when the conflict is on its way to being resolved. The resolution of a story is the final part of a story where the problems faced reach logical solutions. This is where readers or viewers say goodbye to their favorite characters, as well as those they dislike, and all the loose ends are neatly tied. There are some ways to resolve conflict in a short story. Slow down on the intensity of the conflict. Do not add any new dimensions to the conflict. Begin explaining why the conflict occurred in the first place and allow the characters to compromise and come to an understanding. Make the protagonist appear like a hero or heroine. Readers are often happy when the hero or heroine has defeated the antagonist and all the other characters appear safe and at peace. Now we will talk about various techniques used in narrative writing. Writing a narrative piece requires not only creativity but ample planning. Every element of the story or film must be considered and must include techniques that make the story captivating to the reader or viewer. There are many techniques which can be used to enhance the plot of a narrative. These techniques include flashback, foreshadowing, cliffhangers, plot twists. What is flashback? This is a narrative technique where the reader or viewer is taken out of the present scene or story and into an earlier period or time frame. In other words, the plot is paused temporarily and events which already took place in the past are mentioned or highlighted. A writer uses flashback to recount important events that affect and enhance the present development of the plot. What is foreshadowing? This is another technique which is frequently used in narrative writing. It allows events which will happen in the future, later in the story, to be hinted to the readers. This is a useful technique because it builds suspense, tension, and heightens excitement and anticipation. In essence, foreshadowing helps to keep readers or viewers' interests throughout the story or film. What are cliffhangers? This is a technique in which the story ends in an unexpected, shocking way. When this happens, part of the story remains unresolved. Hence, the word cliffhangers, that is hanging on the edge of a cliff. The reader is left on the edge, craving more of the story. Now let's talk about plot twist. Plot twist is a literary technique in which an unexpected event or action takes place at any point in the plot. The unforeseen change in the direction of the story catches the reader by surprise. Educators, it is important for us to make our students realize the importance of the usage of figurative language in enhancing a story. Figurative language is one of the main staples or ingredients which will make narrative writing appealing. Figurative language enables the readers to be immersed in the written material and creates vivid mental pictures of the scenes. It refers to the devices used in writing that take meaning beyond the literal level. There are many figurative devices that a writer can use, like sarcasm, pun, hyperbole, oxymoron, imagery, and symbolism. Educators, you have a task on hand. Select one or two of the discussed techniques that you would like to incorporate into your story. You must make sure that it complements the conflict type and the other techniques that you have selected. Note where in your plot you will use each technique. The absence of punctuation marks also makes the story incomprehensible. As a result, it is extremely important that we teach our students about the rules and uses of punctuation marks. More importantly, the writing of a narrative involves the use of quotation marks to set off or highlight dialogue. Quotation marks or speech marks are always used in pairs and are used at the beginning and end of a dialogue. There are some simple rules that one must follow when using quotation marks. Use quotation marks for the direct words of a speaker. The quotation marks should be opened at the beginning of the speaker's words and closed when the character has finished speaking. For example, we will not give in to those unrealistic demands, the president whispered. The quotation marks close after the end mark. For example, help, help me please, I am in excruciating pain, screamed Kimberly. Use single quotation marks within a quotation to show the speaker is repeating someone else's words. For example, no sooner had I entered the kitchen than mother said, your father and I are getting a divorce. And I almost stopped breathing, cried Liliana. Educators, let's teach our students the importance of local language in narrative writing. Local language makes writing more authentic as it reflects the character's setting, culture, and daily lives. Local language gives writing flavor to the piece. It allows the reader to gain a better understanding of the characters' backgrounds and reasons for their behavior. When using local language in your story, remember that it must be used as a part of direct speech. You can use these dialogues to help your reader understand the nature of the conflict, or even to develop and resolve the conflict. Educators, you have another task on hand. Can you include any local language in your story? It could be as simple as the exclamations used by your characters, or it can be used as a speech pattern that creates the identity of one of your characters. It is time to draft your story or revise your draft using all the elements that you have learned and planned so far. Firstly, there are different types of conflict that can be used in narrative writing. Person versus self, person versus nature, person versus person, person versus the supernatural, person versus machine. The intensity of the conflict in a story may make or break the story. One of the main ways to resolve conflict is to make the protagonist appear to be a hero or heroine. Narrative techniques make writing more creative and appealing to the readers. Narrative techniques include flashback, foreshadowing, cliffhangers, plot twists. Short stories must contain dialogue. Dialogue featuring local language can make writing more authentic. Educators, I hope the session was enriching enough to be worthy of your precious time. I also hope that you take the learning back to your classrooms. Thank you.